Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well, then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. As you grow and scale, it will become inevitable that you will be forced to trust your employees with your money in a way. So we're also talking not about just hiring in finance and actually trusting people to be stewards of your money in that way, but also your employees who say work on your sales team, or maybe they're in your professional services firm and they're going out there mingling with clients and expected to spend money. At a certain point, though, it will become an expectation, if not a requirement, for you to front that money in a sense and have them not spend it personally. It's also not the most professional look, in my opinion, for if you're running a professional services firm or in general, I would say just it's not the best look to say, hey, we expect you to front your hotel bill or your meals or whatever all the time, and then we'll reimburse you later. Now, I have no problem with the expense reimbursement process and doing that at a certain point, but it is much, much easier for everybody involved if you just have some type of expense management platform. Now, one that we do recommend is Ramp. Ramp is really easy to use. And also, it enables you to have cards for all your employees, monitor where they're spending money, what they're spending money on, set certain limitations and all that, and monitor. So, one area that you want to be looking into is expense management and limitations and budgets. And not to be a downer and a buzzkill and set budgets for everybody, but you kind of have to because you have to set what's reasonable because your employees don't want to take advantage of you. They don't want to go out and spend all your money. Well, maybe some do, but they most of the time are not looking to abuse the privilege. Most of the time, they're not trying to abuse that. If you perceive that they're abusing that, then that might be just a gap in expectations of what you're setting. And you're not setting the proper limitations around that and saying, we're not reimbursing over X dollars and you don't have a policy in place. So, number one, even before you get some type of expense management platform, please, I beg of you, have a policy in place that dictates what types of expenses you're willing to reimburse for, what types of expenses go on company cards, if you have company cards, and what the limitations are and the requirements for keeping receipts and so on, and actually signing off on them. Maybe even approval processes, right? What types of expenses or how much money in expenses has to go through senior leadership, things like that. And we're implementing that across our client base as well, asking those types of questions. You know, we have plenty of clients who are in the eight figures who may not even have these types of policies in place. I know, right? But it's true of every business. You don't have it until you have it. And nobody really like knocks on your door once you cross 5, 6, 10 million and says, hey, you're at this level and you should have this in place by now. It really just comes down to as soon as you learn about it, you go, oh, we should probably do that. And you go do it. So if that's your moment right now, welcome. And we are working on this with several clients. So expense reimbursement policy, expense management policy, what goes on company cards, what are the limitations, what do you need receipts for, all those things. So you have to define that. And as I always say, even if it's on crayon on a napkin and someone can just sign off on it, that's a policy. But, you know, Google Docs work too. Hey there, are you on LinkedIn? I love connecting with listeners and other professionals and business owners on that platform. I got to say, I'm really enjoying it. So if we're not already connected, make sure you send me a connection request after this episode. So, another thing is you want to build a money conscious culture if you don't want people to abuse their ability to spend your money. So, one thing that we've done is, and I know this firsthand at Keep What You Earn, you know, I have employees who have company cards and they don't use them all that frequently because we're not one where we have a lot of travel costs or things like that. But I do have cards that certain employees can use for their subscriptions or if they want to invest in something, they don't have to ask my permission. Like if they want to go buy office supplies and things like that. Now, I can monitor the spend on those cards. I can also set limitations. You can do this through credit card companies as well, set up sub cards and so on. It doesn't take much effort, by the way. But also, on top of that, and in conjunction with that, We also have a very money conscious culture where there is transparency to some degree on the financial performance of the company and budgets. So, a big part of building a money conscious culture within your company is to actually share with them, where you are with respect to the budget or what the budget actually is or what's a reasonable budget for things. People often don't want to abuse the privilege of using your money. They don't really want to. But what ends up happening is they accidentally do or unintentionally do because you haven't set the proper expectation of what's reasonable. What is reasonable for a meal with these people? What is reasonable for airfare, right? Do you have employees who try to fly first class when there are clearly coach or, comfort plus seats available, whatever it looks like? Are there people who just kind of like, well, the company's paying for it? Well, are they accountable to that? Are they accountable to some type of budget or metric? Like if they stay under budget, do they then get some type of, bonus or something? I love the idea of setting the limit of okay, there's per diems or there's budgets associated and if you stay under that, we'll just give you the remainder in compensation, like there's those things. Or there might just be limitations per item. Like at the firm I worked at, we used to have these limitations in like New York City, let's say $75 per meal per person. And we would just use that as our baseline of what we could spend on dinner before we would need to provide any sort of receipts. The credit card charges were just fine. And that would get approved. So it really just depends on your company and your culture, what you want to set. But also, you have to be willing to communicate how close you are to meeting a budget, how close you are to certain limitations, and what you should be really having your employees focus on when they're swiping these cards, if they need to justify the types of expenses too, and if they need to come back and be accountable to anybody for spending those dollars. So, for example, if you build a money conscious culture and you say, okay, our travel budget for this quarter is XYZ, and you have a constant transparency on what has been consumed of that budget, now people know, hey, I have consumed 80% of my travel budget for the quarter and it's only January. So, uh-oh. So maybe it will actually help them balance out these types of expenses by giving them a sort of limitation and a boundary line. Or maybe there's a process to request additional budget and justify it. But that's up to you, right? All of these are just ideas. So, in a way, if you want to help control a bit more spending in your company, these are just ways you can handle doing that. I would say both should probably coexist. But the first thing starts with a policy. And then I would look at maybe independent card management where they have their own cards, like a ramp card, or like, I know American Express and Chase do this where you can have sub cards. I think most credit card companies do. And or you should have some transparency into the financials, not full transparency, don't get me wrong, but some transparency into the budget system so that people understand how much of their budget they've consumed and then can spend consciously. Now, if you're having trouble with both of these things and you're saying, well, I have a policy, they're not respecting it. I have corporate cards, but they're not the right types of expenses. They're going over the limits. And I also have, I'm trying to foster a money conscious culture, but these people are just abusing the privileges. Well, then maybe they're not a fit for you. Like maybe these are also boundary lines where you can find out if someone's trying to take advantage of you. Maybe these are good boundary lines for your assessment process with your hires, like to say, hey, maybe this isn't a good fit if you can't respect our money here, because that's probably a bad sign. So just keep all this in mind as you go through and you realize as you hire employees that if they need money, these are ways that you could possibly handle it. And I would highly recommend instituting some of this even before you need to, because even with a team of 7 like myself, we've started doing this. And even though not everybody needs a card, we do have policies, we do have procedures. Whether it's 2 people or it's 20, the policy is the same. So you might as well establish these policies now and set those expectations as you hire the team, as opposed to waiting until something bad happens and then creating those boundary lines. That's how a lot of policies are formed, right? If somebody breaks the system and now we have to put it in writing, please don't do that again. So this is an opportunity now. Define that, set the tone, and then go implement. So profitability is one thing, but cash flow is what truly keeps your business running smoothly. It's not just about how much you make, it's about how much you can actually use to sustain and grow and maintain that cash in your control. When you book a power session with me, we can take a look at your payment cycles, your transaction timing, and your personal cash needs to make sure you're staying ahead of the curve. Managing cash flow is a constant process, but one of the most important pieces of the puzzle for a successful business. Find out more information about a power session with me to do your cash flow forecast in the show notes.